Hey everybody, what is up? I am doing a live stream tonight because I am trying to make sure I don't miss it this week. It's been a little bit crazy, as pretty much all of you have known for a few weeks, and I am just trying to not let it get the best of me because I really enjoy our live streams, and it seems like you guys do as well. So here we are. Tonight, we're going to be talking a little bit about some tree rigging tips and concepts for sketchy rigging situations. Now, some of this might be concepts that you might want to implement in your rigging, but a lot of it's just concepts to use while in the rigging process to make yourself more comfortable with the rigging situation, I guess is the best way to say it. So we're going to talk about that a little bit because I find personally that um, super sketchy tree rigging situations should be treated slightly different than normal tree rigging situations. All of it should be handled with care and be relatively delicate about it, but uh, you've got to kind of be balanced with when they're more extreme. You want to treat them in a different way, if that makes any sense. So the way that we're going to go about it this evening is just briefly talking about some of the things somebody asked me last night, in fact, about a rigging situation that they had coming up today. First off, I have to applaud them that because of wind, they chose not to do the job, and so of course the client wants the situation managed because a big top out of a pine broke off and fell between the pine and another hardwood. Um, but the problem is that the wind isn't a favorable situation, and worst thing that's going to happen is they're going to lose a fence. It sounds like so. Your life versus potentially them breaking a fence because the top fell. You know, but here's another factor: is that uh, the the challenge is that a lot of times as climbers and as arborists, we don't want to miss that job opportunity. Let me catch up on a couple of comments here. Rick with Brother or High Climbers Brotherhood says, "Hey, bro, hope all is well. Sorry, I've been MI been focusing on myself and branding HCB. No, I get it, man. It takes a lot to keep it going. So I'm just glad that you were able to stop by for a few minutes, Rick. Thanks, man. I really appreciate that." And then Matthew says, "Hey, Eric, what's up, man? Nice to see you. Um, thank you all for joining." So, yeah, it we all have to be cautious and do our due diligence with rigging as a general rule. You shouldn't ever take it lightly. I don't care how long you've been doing there's a lot of dynamic forces going on, and it can go bad quickly. But if it's a super sketchy, especially like big wood hung up in a tree, then you definitely need to start reevaluating um, how you're going to do it and things. And my conversation actually with Matthew is who reached out to me last night. Um, help me um, to think about what I go through and what maybe I can express to you guys, and maybe it'll help. I don't know. Um, yes, Rick, for sure. You very true. Use gravity to your advantage, and that's it. But also respect the circumstances, right? So the just very briefly, the situation that we talked about was going to end up using two rigging points, one on each tree, the spar that the top broke off of, and the tree that it was hung up in, if that makes sense. And it was still attached, so it's like almost horizontal. Um, but it's barely on, and you've got a yes, Rick. your surroundings as well. Be very aware of your surroundings. So what I started thinking about was using neighboring trees and stuff, which we all, that's a basic climbing skill, is to analyze what's around that I could climb out of that might make me safer and things like that. The challenge is that sometimes those trees that are neighboring aren't super close. So you might have like a 20-foot or 30-foot gap. I don't sorry, Rick, I don't understand Skylab. Rick asked, did you set up a floating block or a Skylab? So basically it was 2 points to lower one butt first to the ground, and then once you got that to swing off, because we were just talking about the scenario, by cutting off the butt end with it tethered so it wouldn't like fall and swing immediately. The other end could be lowered down in a controlled manner so as not to damage the live hardwood that the top had fallen into more than needed, if that makes sense. So the top had fallen through a crotch on the hardwood, and the top had to be cut off, the tip of it, so that you could actually pull it kind of backwards and lower it down, if that makes sense. So I was recommending 2 blocks with 2 lowering systems so that you could swing the one down, get it on the ground, cut it off, let it shift back slightly in a controlled manner, then drop the tip down to the ground. Does that make sense? It's a system I've used a number of times. Now, it's not the system you want to use on every situation. It's just the way. 2 separate systems, Rick. But it is a good system for certain situations. Okay. So, what got me thinking about things though is, as we were talking about it, I started talking about certain steps that I recommended for the system. And there's certain things that I do in prep of those more intricate, unpredictable, sketchy situations that I don't always do in normal climbing. And it's not because I'm being less safe under normal climbing situations. It's just there's so many factors that could go wrong. And when you have a big top that's 30 foot long that's broken off and is hanging, that's a lot of weight and a lot of wood and brush material and all kinds of stuff that can shift, twist, pop, unexpectedly shoot back at you under certain circumstances and things. So I'm really, really cautious about how I go about setting up my lanyards and things. And so as we were talking about it, if I can, I always prefer to be tied into a neighboring tree and not just solely on the tree where the top broke out of, if that makes sense, because you have to cut that loose at some point. Yeah, for sure, Rick. Rick says those are always fun. Very, very true. They're sketchy. So what I mentioned yesterday, and I don't know a lot of people do this, but I do recommend. So you're going to set up, if you're going to set up this kind of system, you're going to set up a block, or some kind of, it could even be rings or whatever that are strong enough to manage that side of the top that's coming out. And then you're going to be stuck on a spar. And the only way you can really do this carefully is to have a little bit of dynamic drop in it. You don't want much, but you do want it to come off and go over and rest into the block, sit into the block. Well, because you are at some point in a negative rigging situation. You just don't want it to be like full on, running if you can help it a lot of times. So first off, in those kinds of specific situations, I recommend a like you would do for a snap cut, just a kerf cut through the sapwood, just above your lanyard and above your rigging tie-in and above your choker line, especially if you have to be tied onto the same spar. That way, if it starts to peel as you're trying to cut the butt off, and because it's usually like spray all sprawled and gnarled out, but you usually have some tissue still connected. So as you're cutting that, sometimes that tension can kind of try to pull it away, and it can start to peel down, and then it can get into where your rigging point is, and it can start pulling on your rigging lanyard, and it can create this tension fight between your block and your rigging, your lanyard. I mean your lanyard, your sling, and it's not ideal, right? So I always recommend a good curve cut. If you do a curve cut there, if it does start to pill over, then that curve cut will create a stop and it'll just pop off, which once again might give you a little bit of a ride and may not be ideal for you, but it's better than it trying to split down the tree and trying to rip off your rigging sling. So that's something I definitely recommend. But before you even make those cuts, if you're tied into a tree that's behind you, I recommend using a long lanyard, especially if there's a big expanse between you and the neighboring tree. Like if it's 20 foot between the spar you're on and where you'll swing to, if you have to get off really quick, I recommend a really long lanyard, like 20 footer. And here's why. One of the first things I always do in these situations is I climb up, I put my lanyard about where it would be for the cut and everything, and where I figure my rigging will go. Sometimes I even set my rigging sling so that I know it's in place, and I put my lanyard where I want it. Whether you want your lanyard below the block or above it's up to you. I prefer mine above the block, but behind the rigging rope, if that makes any sense. And I always do a test. So after you've tested your tree to climb in, of course, you don't want to ever get in the tree without testing that. But after I do the test, I will like do an emergency release on my lanyard and like let my lanyard go and me swing out as fast as I can toward the tree I'm tied into. I hope that makes sense. High Climber says, are you going to NAOM Williamsburg May? No, I'm not this year, man. I might get out and do some stuff later this season. I'm talking to some sponsors about a few things, but not going to NAOM this year. Maybe next year. We'll see. I'm so swamped with work right now. It's crazy too. So I've just been crazy busy. But I do an emergency release test and let my lanyard run as fast as I can to the end of my lanyard, making sure my stopper knot's good and all that stuff. And then I'll throw in a 3-to-1. I always carry my 3-to-1 on me so that I can pull myself back into the spar easily. And that gives me a good test feel of what I might have to deal with if something goes really wrong and the butt end drops off unexpectedly and the spar starts to take a dynamic hit. And sometimes it's not just about the fear of the spar going over, because if your lanyard's around it, that's a whole nother issue. But sometimes it's just not wanting to deal with that extreme jar and shake of that with your lanyard being that close and you being attached to it, because there's a lot of heavy wood moving in very close proximity to where your body would be. You know, it's just how it is. So you want to make some good decisions about testing. Thanks, Rick. Rick says, okay, cool. If you need any help, let me know. Got to run. Love the longer lanyard. Definitely a good idea. Thanks, man. Appreciate it. So take care, man. I'll talk to you later. All right. So yeah, I recommend that at first. Know your escape route. Like, know what you're doing. Know how you're going to get out of it if something happens, because like I said, if you've set it up right, you've done your testing, most likely the spar isn't going to come over on you. Hopefully. But it could send you for a very strong ride, and you could have very jagged, pointed, very heavy wood floating around on a block and swinging in unpredictable directions near you, right? So just definitely do a dry run of your emergency escape to get away from that spar and what might occur and what you might do about it. And even if the lanyard has to be cut by a knife or something because you're kind of trapped at that point, um, you're already 10 feet further that way. So now instead of a 20 foot or a 25-foot swing, it's only a 10 or a 15-foot swing, which is way more manageable. It just makes it way more practical for you. So definitely, like, pre-think how you're going to do this stuff and think about your emergency escape routes. And in these sketchy situations, definitely I really recommend just practicing it real quick and seeing what you might, if it doesn't work, if you find your lanyard's getting trapped and it's not releasing you and it's not moving around the spar like it should on, like, basically essentially the the MRS system, then you need to readjust something so that it will work the way it needs to in an emergency situation. Okay. um the other thing was, I was super stoked that Matthew told me this morning that because of wind they decided not to do it right at that moment. um it's hard sometimes. Sometimes we just want to get the work and we don't want to miss a paying job, or sometimes we want to help out a client and we feel bad for them and we want them to feel safe and comfortable. But fighting extreme winds, I mean, today we've had 26-mile-an-hour winds, and I didn't climb today. And I climbed in 26-mile-an-hour winds? Yeah. I've been in willow trees when 60-mile-an-hour winds came through, and it's not fun, and I'm not recommending it. They caught me off guard, and sometimes you just have to hunker down and bear through it. But it's definitely not a good idea to press it with winds and things like that, especially when dealing with extreme rigging situations. Another thing that I really think is key for rigging is being over prepared, I guess, is kind of key in my opinion. Not that you need to go like over the top, but there's the old saying, one is none and two is one. And I really believe that with rigging ropes. I always have 2 or 3 rigging ropes in my truck because you never know what kind of complicated situation you might find and might need. Sometimes having that tag line and having the 2 different rigging lines on separate systems is what is the best way to control a situation. And then, of course, it's good if you have rings and it's good if you have a block, but it's better if you have 2 sets of rings or 3 sets of rings than if you have 2 sets of blocks or 3 sets of blocks, because you just never know when you might need multiples, and you might never know when you think your multiple setup is good enough, but then you find out you need 1 more block for a redirect or something, right? So, yeah, I really recommend having more than minimal equipment if that's at least available to you. I'm not saying you always have to use it, but it is good to have it with you in case you need it, if that makes sense. So I just thought I'd kind of throw that out there for you guys a little bit, and hopefully that helps. Maybe it gives you a few points to think about that you hadn't thought about. Even if you don't normally climb with long lanyards, definitely consider long lanyards for certain situations. So if you have an old hank of a climbing line and it's like a 25 foot or a 20 foot, and you can make it into a lanyard you use every once in a while, that is an awesome thing to have around just for the moments and the situations where you aren't sure if a short lanyard is a good idea. Like, for instance, being in a neighboring tree and it's way away from you, that lanyard can make your escape way more safe and comfortable than if you're on a 6-foot lanyard. You can only move 3 feet away because it's doubled rope, right? And then you have to swing another 18 feet over. It's rough. So this is a good thing. Matthew is actually asking any tips on lanyards management for long lanyards. So there's a few really basic ones. I have tried the magnetic lanyard system. Who is it that makes that thing? It's a guy's name, but I don't remember his name. I know that Gap Arbor Supply sells them. It's basically 2 paracord loops tied around a very strong magnet. You girth hitch one onto your saddle. You girth hitch one. I'm sorry, you like 4-wrap prusik around your lanyard, and you can move it up and down, and you clip it to itself, and it makes a loop. Basically, it's not bad. I did find that I didn't use it as much as I thought I would, but it's not a bad system. It's like $15 or $20 or something, so it might be a good option for you. Some guys use carabiners and will clip carabiners around their saddle and run their tail around their saddle, so that can help. That way you can kind of get like draping loops. Kiyoshi Dave says, my lanyard is 18 foot long and I sometimes use it like a second lifeline. Works great for awkward positions. Me too, man. I climb with 2 long lanyards sometimes. Sometimes I climb with 1 long lanyard and a shorter lanyard, but I almost always climb with 2 lanyards plus my lifeline. And it's awesome for work positioning, especially in large canopies. And but like Matthew's asking, managing the long lanyard can be a bit of a thing. You know what? I don't remember where I put it, but I just bought the Neat Freak keeper, so I'm gonna give that a go. I also sometimes will just daisy chain my tail of my lanyard and then hook it through a tool carrier like the Petzl carry tool. Kiyoshi Dave says, I've used the scuba hose clips for a lanyard management. Works awesome. You know what? I've heard that. I haven't tried that one yet. I was actually looking at one. Do you know what size hose clamps those are, Kiyoshi Dave? Are they like, is there a certain size hose clamp you're looking for? Does that make sense? I don't know if scuba hose clamps come in different hose diameter sizes. I don't know anything. I'm not a diver, so I don't know anything about that. If you have any information on that, I'd be interested to know. But the keeper, I've heard really good things about that from a number of people, so I'm going to try that one from Neat Freak. I just bought it. Gap Arbor Supply was having a sale on that. You might want to go check that out if you're interested. Matthew, there's nothing wrong with daisy chain. It works really great. So I will oftentimes take my daisy chain and hook the end of my daisy chain or close to the end through the carry tool, because I know I won't get to that length because of that specific job. Just doesn't require it, and it keeps it out of my way of my saw and stuff quite a bit. Zach Richards told me, hold on, Kiyoshi Dave says, I got mine off Wish, 2 for $10 and fits pretty much all ropes. Oh, sweet. I'll look that up. How is the quality of that, Kiyoshi Dave? Is it like a decent quality plastic, or does it feel like it's gonna break real easy? Just curious. Have you had yours break yet? So a few good points on that. And the so what Zach Richards does on his is, let me see it. Let me grab my saddle here. So of course, you know, your keeper goes on the side of your saddle, right? And he actually runs the lanyard through the side ring, and then he has his keeper like back here. And so what it does is it actually creates an extra bite or leg hanging down, right? So it gives you one extra loop that's taking up space instead of just the 3 that the keeper creates on its own, which is really a good idea because it just shortens up those I guess it's 4 bites a little bit easier. Kiyoshi Dave says, haven't had mine break except for the clip, which I switched out for a small accessory binner. Oh, okay. Yeah, good to know. I'll definitely be looking at one of those because I do usually climb with 2 long lanyards, so it makes a little bit different situation there. And other than that, there's a bunch of different ideas that people have had. I don't know. It's really personal preference. Um, Somebody had, I don't remember what it's called now, but somebody had that reel thing. It's essentially like a um, chalk reel, like a chalk line reel, and you could put your lanyard in it, but it was really big. Well, I felt it was kind of big, and I didn't want that on my saddle. But some people have liked it. I don't remember what that thing is called. But yeah, so that might be an option for you. Don't know. Anybody that's joining in, what do you guys do to manage the tail of your lanyards? If you run a little bit longer lanyards, how do you manage your lanyard tails? I don't know other than that. So that might be something helpful for you guys. On other news though, I recently got some shirts from Justin at Saul's. I haven't worn them in photos as much as I should, but he sent me this one here, which is pretty sweet. I really like this thing. Very cool shirt. You can get them through Justin at Saul's as well. I also got this one here, which is pretty rad. I love the bar with the wood grain. Justin at Saul's. So that's pretty sweet. And then today, I got another one in the mail, not from Justin at Saul's, but from Gary Buxton, who builds the saws for Justin at Saul's, and he builds some rad saws. So definitely check out Lucas's shop, justinatsaws.com, one of my sponsors. Weaver Arborist, of course, is one of my sponsors. Gap Arbor Supply is one of my sponsors. They're sponsoring this live, of course. And then, of course, I have to give a big shout out to all of my Patreon members. Look how rad that saw is. That graphic as well. Yeah. Love all these shirts. Very, very cool. So, Mars Gia, James Crawford, Sean Thompson, or a tattooed arborist. Hey, Ben with Parkway Tree. What is up, man? And also, Ruben Craighead and Brian Root. So, very cool. Hey, Patrick. Good to have you on, man. So, yeah, definitely pre-thinking sketchy stuff like that, and then thinking about your lanyard management. Now, really, lanyard management for sketchy rigging, or any rigging really, is really important, because you don't want your lanyard tail to get caught, just like you don't want your climb line to get caught wrapped around a piece that's being chunked off. Even if it's on a rigging line, you're usually letting it run or something like that, and it can pull on you pretty hard if you're not careful. So definitely be careful and pre-think your setup and give it a good test, like I said earlier. And I think that'll help a lot of people out. Don't be in a rush. Take your time. I also got something else from Clogger. They sent this to me, which is rad. I like working with Clogger. They send me stuff every once in a while to test, which is pretty fun. I get to give feedback and do analysis on it and help them develop cool stuff. And this says, they sent me a little note, which is pretty rad. Note says, "Hey Eric, thanks so much for all your feedback. It is seriously appreciated. Take care, the Clogger team." The Clogger guys and gals are amazing. So I am going to give a shout out to Clogger. I'm not sponsored by Clogger. I do work with Clogger from time to time. They did send this to me for free, just so you know. And I love Clogger. All my climbing pants are Clogger. And I'm not saying that there aren't other good climbing pant companies out there, or chainsaw pant companies. Thing about it is that they are by far, in my opinion, the most constant at trying to improve, like, the most minimal what is the word? Accessories and functional aspects of their gear. Just like if you've noticed recently, they just developed a new lace loop or lace hook, and I had the privilege of working with them on that as well. And that detail is what makes a company, in my opinion, awesome. Their stuff looks amazing. It's the most comfortable that I've climbed in, and they have the most innovative ideas, which I just super love. So yeah, I love knowing the people at Clogger and seeing what they come out with. I'm just amazed. So this is the rope guard. Now you might have seen Lawrence Schultz playing with this a little bit and talking about it. So this one is a bit long. I want to say it's 3 feet, 36 inches. So on smaller trees, as Lawrence said, it can be a bit of a challenge because you kind of like have to wrap it around to get it to your lanyard or your rope to cinch like it should, which kind of isn't a bad thing because then it gives you 100% coverage of the trunk exposure for your rope guard. He said that it is hard to get your rope through here, which I haven't tried yet because I just got it like today. So I could see that being a case. Hold on. Don't run off. I'm moving to grab something. So I've got a piece of, what's it called here? Yale ring rope for lanyards. I mean, in a vertical orientation, just pushing it through, yeah, it definitely, could get a bit difficult, but that didn't take too long to pull it through. And see, it's chainsaw protection material, and it protects your rope. Now, to be quite frank with you, I don't foresee using this every time I climb. Where I see this becoming a real benefit to me for chainsaw protection is when I'm doing really big sketchy cottonwoods that I'm removing, and they've got anything over 28-inch diameter trunk material. This could be really handy when you're making blind cuts to position this near the section of where the bar is coming through on the blind side and you can't see it real well, because this rope guard by Clogger could totally be that extra layer of protection that just makes you feel more comfortable about your cut and helps you not be distracted as much about your lifeline, or in my particular case, I'm thinking about it for my lanyard. I mean, that my lanyard's often more usually my choker on a spar for my emergency line, my emergency escape is lower in the system, and I have my lanyard higher, and so my lanyard is the one that is most likely going to be cut if something goes through slightly wrong. And I'm not going to fall to my death most likely because I have my choked off system. But if you cut through your lanyard and you have your choked off escape line lower, then any of the SRS, SRT, whatever you want to call them, systems, or I do a lot of MRS for spars removals. I use an adjustable friction saver. There's a little bit of slack and you're going to fall a few inches, which could topple you a little bit backwards or whatever, and it could just be uncomfortable. But if you have a way to protect your lanyard, even if your chainsaw was in line with it, then this isn't going to let it cut through, and you're not going to topple, right? This material, just like the chainsaw pants, is going to pull out in long strands and choke the bar and the chain, and it's going to stop for you. So yeah, I'm actually really interested. And another huge benefit to this that I see is if you're training somebody new and they're in removal stage, and or even big like pruning, and they're very very green. They haven't had much experience with a chainsaw in their hand up in a tree. This could be awesome because with this added protection for a newbie, they can focus more on chainsaw technique and not be so worried about cutting their lanyard. Now, don't get me wrong, we don't want to encourage bad habits. We still want to keep an eye on them. We still want them to make sure that they're paying attention to where their lanyard is at all times, where their lifeline is at all times. We want to do the same. We want to pay attention to where our lanyard is in big removals, our lifeline is in big removals, our choker is in big removals, you know, all that stuff. But that all being said, this here could help bridge that beginner nervousness to make a more confident and capable saw user in the tree for a climber. And for us as well, it could help us in, like, at least like I have a lot of the cottonwoods and elm trees that I have to do out here, willows, they get big quick up there, and they're not usually very vertical. They're very angled. So it's hard sometimes to know where my lanyard is falling in the blind zone. Even though I'm trying to reach around and clear it, there could be a nub, especially with willows, that's holding it up, and it may not be, you know, quite as low as I think it is, even though it looks like it, because the bark holds the lanyard around the sides real well, and then it kind of rises in the back sometimes. So I'm really looking forward to giving this thing a go, and seeing what happens with it. Hopefully enough people will like them and they'll be beneficial enough. I really think that like chainsaw training schools for climbers could benefit from using these. And I think that having these in different diameters or different lengths would be awesome for smaller diameter trees. So we'll see. I don't know, but I really am excited. So if you haven't seen this yet, this is essentially the same material as what's on their pants, kinda, if that makes sense. So looks very similar as well, and it's definitely chainsaw protection, you know. But yeah, so I am excited about giving this thing a go and seeing what it's like up in the tree and things. I mean, it is a little bit more cumbersome. Don't get me wrong. I'm not making excuses for it, but sometimes a little bit more cumbersome is not awful for certain situations, especially if you're not going to be climbing with it like every day, right? And that's not the idea for me. What is cool though is that they do have these loops, and so you can put a carabiner through it or whatever, or you can clip it into a tool loop, like a carry tool or a transporter or a vault or whatever, or you can put a carabiner through it and then clip that into something, even if it's a microbiner, so that it's easily rackable on you and it doesn't take up too much space. Okay, and that being said, I did want to bring you guys another tip. I know some of you are already doing this. I saw what was it, Strider Tree Gear maybe did one recently on storing and racking slings, and he had good points. I liked what he said. One thing that I noticed though was that, like, so they were talking about doing that thing where you fold them together and then you fold it over, oh, I forgot how you do it now. Fold it over, something like that. And I've seen people do that before. Nothing wrong with that if you like to do that. What I find though in the tree is that that's a lot of work, and I don't feel like doing that. And so if it's really long, do I have a long one in here? I think I do. Yeah. So I'll show you with a long one and a shorter one as well. But so like this one here, all I like to do is, let me grab a carabiner. So, got my carabiner. I will carabine the two eyes together, the two ends, so it makes a bite, right? Like that. And then I just twist it till it gets really tight, like this. And then I just carabine it again. And now it's like super compact. And it stays like this. It might roll a little bit and become a little less compact, but it's going to be compact. And it doesn't get caught on hardly anything. I never have a problem with it. And then here's the cool part. Same thing as the other one. You unhook it, and all you've got to do is fling it out, and there you go. It's ready to use, and it's super just easy, right? It's not hard at all. So yeah, on these shorter ones, you just leave it the normal length if you want, even, and just do it. You know, you just spin it if you don't want to do that. But doubling it definitely makes it handy as well. And if you don't want to spend all that time on the shorter ones, you can just kind of do like that and then spin it a few more times up in the tree. Oh, if you don't drop it like I just did, which does happen sometimes. And then you just hook it back and you're ready to go. And then there you go. You've got it super compact, and it's just hanging on your saddle, which is amazing because it's super easy at that point to do. Same thing with this one. Just gotta the long one, you know. So with the long ones, what I will do, once again, here it is, and there it is. It's fully open, no tangles, nothing. So great little way of storing. A friend of mine, Zephyr, when he was climbing with me, he always doubled his over, and then he tied them in a overhand knot. And he liked that, but he used Dyneema, like smaller Dyneema ones. These bigger, thicker ones are a little bit harder to do that with, but you can. So he would tie them in a knot, like an overhand, and there they are as well. So it just, you know, different ways of doing things. Not particularly bad. It's up to you. So, you know, and then it's not that hard to undo. He just folded his in half, like I said. So same thing like the way I was showing you earlier. Like this one's really long, so I'll go ahead and double it to begin with. There we go. Like so. Now I'm going to spin it and twist it. Arg. If I keep... I don't ever do this in the tree this much as far as dropping them, but of course when I'm on camera, I'm going to. This one's really stiff. It's really thick. I've never actually used a loop runner quite this thick in material, but I'm not complaining. It's really, really durable. This is a Weaver loop runner, and I love this thing. Super, super great for rigging and things like that, and I use it a lot for backup tie-offs and canopies that are sketchy on like maple trees and stuff, or for redirects. But there you go. See, it just compiles down like that. Doesn't hardly ever get hung up. I don't think I've ever had it get hung up. Then you can, hey Josiah, I was just talking about you, man, in a good way. I was just talking about how you were showing that system of how to store these things, and I was just showing some ideas and ways that I've done it too. So Zephyr would have done a overhand like this as well, and then another overhand sometimes like so, and then clipped it like that, and it's also slight, it's not quite as compact as what Josiah has showed in his video or what I was just showing, but it does work. So keep that in mind. You guys, there's a million ways to do things. None of them are the best way, particularly. They all have pros and cons. Some of them are just preference, so that's okay. Just showing you guys different ways that you might like to store your loop runners. Definitely, if you get a chance, go use the Weaver loop runners. I really, really like these things. They're great. I really do. But yeah, so I guess today that's kind of it for this live. Appreciate you guys stopping by. Once again, if you would like to support Elevated Office, of course you can buy t-shirts. If you would like to support by being a member of Patreon, if you're a patron, then what that gets you is a number of different things, and it also gets you a live conference with me every other month, and it also gets you free stickers and various other things. So look at that. If you want to support my supporters, my sponsors, Weaver Arborist is great. They have a bunch of gear that's really, really handy. I love their ditty bags and different things that I'm using from them. If you're on old school spurs, then the Pro Cool pads are amazing upgrades for a lot of those. Also, don't forget Gap Arbor Supply. They have a lot of good stuff. I love my Arbor Tech boots for spike climbing. They're way better than the hikes, whatever you want to call them, for spur climbing. But I love the hikes for pruning and general climbing. I do. So there's that. And then, of course, Just Send It Saws. He just sent me some new filters for my 501p. If you haven't seen it, go check out Tree Strider's new video on YouTube. It's really well done. Go check out Zigzag Man's new video about the 501p from Just Send It Saws as well, which Gary with Buxton Work Saws ported and polished and built, which is amazing. And it's I have these because the Echo does tend to get a lot of dust in the filter, and because it is a manually tuned carburetor and I work at different altitudes quite a bit, it does change the way that they perform. So I figured having a few extra air filters around would buy me better time. I always carry a can of brake cleaner in my truck so that I can wash out my filters and let them dry, and I can throw in another filter in the meantime. So hope that's just some tips that helps you guys out. Thank you all for stopping by, and I will see you guys in the next one. Take care and have a good night. Be safe out there climbing for the rest of the week, and don't rush it. No amount of money is worth your life or the life of somebody else. So just take your time, get it done right, and charge what it's worth, and you'll be a good tree service company, all right? So talk to you guys later. Take care. Bye.